Trust your bodies. Do and don't do. Uh, be proactive, be aware, be conscious. Do things that are beneficial for you when needed, and then enjoy your life and stop. Because you if you are taking a product every single day, all the time, you're gonna tell your body you're not well and you're not in the right place to thrive and enjoy your life. So become proactive. Amazing. You should, because there's a lot of challenges right now in the modern world. But when you finish with a smile in your face and let your body rest and enjoy your life because you are healthy enough. If you feel healthy enough, you should enjoy that time too. And by design, we're meant to be healthy, not sick. So just shut down for a minute from all the input on the information and enjoy life, because this is a beautiful world, regardless of the toxins and everything we're getting on the side. It's a beautiful world. We should be enjoying.
Welcome to the TBD Fit podcast on Dr. Talks. I'm your host, Daniel Quile, and I will be guiding you through this wellness journey in terms of optimizing health and longevity, where we unpack the science, the do's, the don'ts, and everything in between. Come join us. Look forward to seeing you inside.
Welcome back to the TBD Fit podcast. I'm your host, Dr. D, and my goal is simple: to tease out who is doing the best work in their category and distill all the relevant information, bring it back to you guys so we can all live healthy and wealthy lives. Today's guest is on a powerful topic, often overlooked by conventional medicine, in terms of how environmental toxins affect our gut microbiome and ultimately contribute to disease. Joining me today is someone who's truly on the front lines of this conversation, Dr. Haroldo Magarinos, a Chilean dentist and naturopathic doctor specializing in periodontics, oral medicine, and surgical implantology. He's dedicated years to studying the oral gut axis and its role in systemic health. As a co-founder and lead scientist at DetoxU, he's been pioneering methods for advanced toxin detection and detoxification strategies. His mission is to empower people with the knowledge and tools to reduce their toxic burden and optimize health. It is an absolute privilege to have you today. Your presentation at a conference we were just at recently really opened up some interesting questions, which I look forward to continue today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here. That was an amazing way of pronouncing my name. I don't think I can do better than that. So thank you so much. You made my day just by saying my name with that beautiful pronunciation. Hardly get that.
I mentioned earlier, I have a tongue for language given my ethnicity. So father from Italy, mother from Eastern Europe. So growing up, I spoke their native tongues in English. I actually learned in school Spanish, similar to Italian. I studied it as well. So I do have a tongue for language in some respect. So, but I haven't been to your part of the world
Beautiful.
yet, which I look forward to at some point. So hopefully I can come join you whenever you go there next.
Oh, I would love to. Yeah, it will be my pleasure. I will be your tour guide. Yeah, we will make it happen.
So in terms of your history, I always like to open up just to provide our community with, how did you get into kind of what you're doing today?
It has not been a short journey for sure, but I'll try to summarize it as much as I can. So as you mentioned, I'm a dentist. I'm a traditionally trained dentist. I'm a periodontist. I was performing surgery and dental treatments for 12 years of my life. I was also part of the staff of several universities. So I was teaching on a permanent basis. And I love that. The education was one of my most joyful parts of my practice and my professional routine. And what happened is that I was practicing at the same time I was asking questions. I believe most of us were asking questions, simple questions like why this treatment doesn't provide a long-term resolution, or why, if we think we know the root cause of this disease and we're aiming towards that, we're not fixing the problem for good. Why people are coming back over and over with these chronic illnesses that they're not resolved, even though we're doing our best and with all the guidelines to treat them and supposedly fix them and heal them on a permanent basis. I couldn't live with those questions. That's the reality. And I was very lucky. I would say that I'm very blessed because I asked and I was given with the things that I was asking for. People that led me to the field of biological dentistry and natural medicine. Down the road, I started getting deeper into the microbiome, which led me to collaborate with different companies across the country and lecture about microbiome testing, microbiome protocols. I had a practice which I was seeing patients for microbiome balancing protocols as well. And there was one thing that was a common denominator in every single person I saw that was severely, or not even that severely, but it was affected by microbiome imbalances and chronic illnesses that were not resolving in the standard form, and that factor were toxins. And I started testing for toxins, and I realized that toxicity was the major blocking agent for improving health conditions or staying on a good place over time. And I was testing side by side toxins and microbiome analysis, and things were really correlated. So down the road, I had the opportunity to build something around detoxification support, and with my intention of healing and improving microbiome imbalances, which is connected to every chronic illness we know so far. And that's how I built the company I'm co-founder right now, which is called DetoxU, and we produce products, and we're working on launching a test to understand this in more depth and provide more tools for helping people in this realm. But it just started with questioning things. Why is this not working? What is getting in the way, and why things are not giving me the outcomes I'm looking for on a day-to-day basis?
I share your sentiment 110%. There's questions and then there's better questions. And I think if you look in terms of modern drugs, like Alzheimer's, an example, perhaps we're asking the wrong questions. Perhaps similar with cancer. But not for today's talk. Let's get into toxins, because that too is probably one of the most ubiquitous tests we are now running in terms of how we can look under the hood and assess kind of what someone has been exposed to. And obviously we live in this kind of chemical soup, especially here in the United States. Unfortunately, a lot of what is acceptable here is banned in some other countries globally. But you've called toxins the silent disruptors. So help our audience understand, why are they so difficult to detect and how they impact our biology?
Well, the main problem with toxins is that they create a long-term, low-grade activation of the immune system, and also a disruption on the performance of both your microbiome functionality and your cell functionalities. So this doesn't happen on just 24 hours and from one week to another. You need time as a factor to create the damage that can be visible on a clinical testing or from a clinical standpoint. And that it's that's the issue in terms of acknowledging toxins to become to be the main driver of disease nowadays. Now, if you see a graph of the abundance and the production of chemicals in this country from the past 20 years and the expression of chronic illnesses, they align perfectly. I have one, I don't have it here right now, but I have one in one of the slides I use for my presentations where you can clearly see the correlation. And if this was just a coincidence, I always ask, what else? Okay, explain me what other element that has been incorporated in our modern world from the past 20 years can explain the rise of these chronic illnesses. Because food, it is a factor, but food itself doesn't cause disease. I understand there's terrible foods, but the terrible foods are actually terribly toxic. So it is the food to blame, or the amount of toxins we added to that food, and that is creating the issue. And if you start thinking, the microbiome is quite resilient, always is trying to go back to a balance point. On its own, it shouldn't cause major issues unless there's toxicity involved. And that's when it shifts on a permanent basis to something else and drives the immune system crazy because of that reason. So before you're even born, you're getting exposed to hundreds of chemicals on a daily basis. And not all of these chemicals are able to be eliminated on a simple form throughout your body's detoxification pathways. Some of them, they will get accumulated. Some people, genetically speaking, are more prone to accumulate these toxins, especially certain forms of biotoxins like mycotoxins. And now you add the time factor into this equation. 10 years down the road, you have a chronic illness developed. It could be metabolic, it could be autoimmune, it could be neurocognitive, whatever you name it. It's just this ongoing expression of the immune system driven by toxicity factors in the course of time that creates the damage and the alteration in our physiology that leads to this chronic illness occurrence.
So I want to dive deep into the impact of some of these toxins on the microbiome specifically, because that's what really piqued my intrigue during your presentation and how you were elegantly connecting the dots and what happens when you're unable to detoxify some of these chemicals. But the first part that kind of awoke everyone's mind was what I think you reference, a modern morning in the modern world, something of that sort, where when you wake up, your first drink coffee, which is often enough rife with mold toxicity, often enough which you can't even boil out. Some of these are just so potent. So while organic, it certainly does matter in many circumstances. You're first exposed with your first glass, then you shower, and now you're exposing yourself to either fluoridated water or chlorine from the water. As your pores kind of open up, you're spraying on some or lathering on some other chemicals or fragrances in the form of phthalates, other VOCs that are through release from the pipes. And then comes breakfast, and you're having wheat or some sort of bread with avocado toast, something like that, which is often sprayed with glyphosate before the harvest, which is a known antibiotic. And then you have other forever chemicals down the road, which are used in kind of cookingware, and sometimes the eggs then have some mycotoxins present. And it's before lunchtime, you were saying, and you're already kind of shot yourself in both your feet. So let's dive into some of these toxins and how they impact the gut microbiome. Obviously, as we mentioned previously, I mean, we're more gut microbes, we're more microbial DNA or bacteria in some respects than human DNA by a factor of 10 to 1, and that number is likely growing rapidly as we begin to learn more. But eager to see the interplay of the microbiome, the mycobiome. But let's first start with some of these toxins. Pick your poison. Which one do you want to discuss first? Heavy metals, maybe?
Which one?
Heavy metals, maybe?
Heavy metals are okay. Yeah, that heavy metals is a good one, actually, to start with. So heavy metals are ubiquitous in soil, most of them. So that's one thing that I like to mention, because we tend to think that these things are foreign, that they're not supposed to be there. And the reality is that many of the toxins we're dealing with right now are part of the environment. It's part of the world we are meant to live in. So not necessarily they're supposed to create damage per se. But the problem is that heavy metals, they can be metabolized in different ways, depending on the status of your biological pathways. That includes the microbiome and also your cells. So when we get oral incorporation of these heavy metals in a small amount, we're able to cope with them. Problem is that we get too much of each kind on a single day basis, because they are bioaccumulated and now in the soil in 10x, 20x, 100x fold. And you can see, for example, EWG.org water report, what we get in the tap water, and you can see things like arsenic, like off the charts, of cadmium off the charts. The problem that happened is that also these heavy metals are highly used in pesticides and herbicides and other waste products of the industrial production of different things. And now they're getting into the cycle of the water, the cycle of the food production, and now they're getting bioaccumulated in the soil way too much. So it is all about the exposure. And at the same time, our microbiome will come into the game and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to deal with these guys because I don't want to die or I don't want to get like killed or damaged by the exposure to these heavy metals. So they will take action, but for them to take action, they need to switch. They need to change the composition of profile in order to have a certain type of pattern that is more able to cope with these damaging elements. And that drives microbiome imbalances on a long-term basis. And that alteration also changes the pattern between the communication of the microbiome and the immune system. And now your immune system is getting red flags from the microbiome. And now your immune system goes whack. And now you have mitochondrial dysfunction because you enter a realm of overexpression of cytokines that are circulating your body all the time, and mast cell activation, and all these other things we talk about on a daily basis when it comes to immunological disorders. So everything is entangled, everything is connected. And the kickstart, it's coming from the lack of consciousness in the way we did things for many years, and we still do. And we're creating a disruption, a bioaccumulation of things that we were able to properly manage to a certain limit, but we passed that limit so far right now. We crossed the line beyond our physiological capabilities. And I like to always emphasize, our body's perfectly designed for elimination of toxins, but the optimization of our pathways is not present as much as it was before because of the lack of nutrients and phytochemicals that were present in our diet. And on the other side, the abundance of toxins went way too far from the normal exposure. So heavy metals are a great example of how something that is naturally occurring on the environment becomes a malignant, damaging element because of the hands of the humans touching all these things and using them for certain purposes, and now dumping them into our nature, and now we get them, we get exposed to them on a daily basis. Now, on that note too, last note, I want to mention mercury. It's one of the most problematic ones because mercury has this tendency of switching to a very, very damaging form that it's very able to get accumulated in the brain, and that the same, I will say, applies to lead and arsenic. And because they love fatty tissues, that's why they have an electromagnetic affinity with those fat tissues, and especially in the brain, they can cross the blood-brain barrier. And now you're testing yourself for these toxins, and you might not see them on the bloodstream, for example, but it's because they're just grabbed on those tissues and they're permanently staying and creating a low-grade inflammatory reaction. And no wonder why we see in animal models with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's down the road what huge levels of arsenic and other heavy metals accumulated in the brains, creating this type of damage. And I think that all these tau and all these other ApoE4, ApoE3 proteins were seen, and all the damage in the histological analysis of the brain is just the result of the activation of defense mechanisms trying to detoxify from all these substances.
Yeah, phosphorylated tau tangles.
Yes.
In Parkinson's, interestingly, going back to asking questions, I don't see Parkinson's necessarily as a brain disease. It's an olfactory issue because things can be entered through the nose through specific chemicals. And then it's also a gut issue that becomes systemic. And as you mentioned elegantly, mercury crossing the blood-brain barrier, mercury displaces magnesium, critical for bone synthesis as we continue to age, also hormone synthesis, metabolism. And then to modern to buffer against our modern stressors. We're completely overworked, under-recovered, malnourished, overfed, certainly toxic. The question is to what degree, and magnesium is kind of the first mineral to buffer against that, which is severely displaced in terms of its elevated mercury. Now, cadmium, looking at cadmium, interestingly, since you mentioned that, which is ubiquitous in the soil, lung cancer was almost null and void prior to smoking. But now what we've adopted is vaping, right? And it's very, very common in our patients who are vaping, which we don't realize. So sometimes it's just a lack from realization that we think we're doing something better, but in fact, sometimes it's more harm than good.
Oh, I absolutely. I mean, I can give testament of that because while I was testing for different types of toxins, at the time I was practicing, the people that were the worst with heavy metals were people that are actually vaping on a daily basis. So that switch that's supposed to be healthier actually is creating more problems than solutions. Um, I'm not advocating for vaping. Actually, I think we're transferring one problem towards another. I think it's bigger than actual smoking. I'm responsible for what I'm saying right now, but nicotine, yes, and all the other elements they added in the tobacco, they're not good for you. I mean, nicotine is only the only thing that might be beneficial to a certain extent, but all the other elements that they're adding to the tobacco plant are definitely not good. And after processing, compared to the amounts that you can get in terms of the potency you get from these heavy metals that are used on the vaping devices, I think that the vaping devices, they have way more load of toxins and heavy metals than what you can get in one cigarette. Not saying that anything is good. I'm not saying transition to cigarettes. I'm saying please cut all these things from the road because you don't need them and your body doesn't need any of these toxins whatsoever.
Interestingly, nicotine, I think there could be, some nootropic effects. We have nicotinic receptors, and so sometimes we use that even to kick out the spike protein in our long haul COVID patients very effectively. So there can be benefit to what nature produces, but in terms of how we modify and play this godlike figure to enhance certain things or isolate certain things, it virtually comes at a very systemic inflammatory cost. Let's segue then into another form, pesticides, one of my favorites. So agricultural chemicals such as pesticides, so herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, you name it, organophosphates, glyphosate. Let's look at how what we're spraying on our food system to what is touted to be able to feed our growing population or to improve yield, how that is actually crippling our health and our microbiome.
Well, yeah. Well, the microbiome probably is one of the parts of the body that gets the most amount of the negative effects of these chemicals for various reasons. First, they make the short chain fatty acid production drop dramatically. That alters everything, including our neurotransmitter pathways, insulin resistance. So we have GLP-1 driven issues just because of the alteration of the microbiota. The GLP-1s agonists are so hot in the market. Well, one of the main things you want to do if you want to improve those pathways is just reducing your toxic load because they will alter your microbiome populations to neglect the GLP-1 production within your gut microbiome, including Akkermansia and other keystone species. They will suffer from the exposure to these chemicals. Now, they altered the ratios between the Firmicutes and Bacteroides, which are the two biggest phylums we have in the microbiome composition, also creating higher risk factors for metabolic disorders like obesity, high blood pressure, etc. Diabetes also. So that's something that is not properly acknowledged. I believe that there's a huge factor in the toxicity world regarding the metabolic optimization we're looking for. And we're very driven into optimize the cell performance. But if your cell doesn't have the room and the space and the clean space to operate, you're not going to get anything out of whatever you're trying to push on the metabolic pathway, within the cell pathways. You need to remove the toxicity factor out of the equation so you have that space to perform or improve your physiological outcomes to its best. It won't work otherwise. The other thing that we know is that glyphosate, which is the famous one in terms um, of the chemicals used in farming right now, it was meant to be used as a chelator, as a pipe cleaner
Pipe cleaner.
initially. So now you can imagine all the cofactors that are needed to activate your cells, to just your electron transport chain. Basically every single thing that you need for moving the gears inside your cells is affected by the presence of glyphosate. Glyphosate is water soluble, so it's pretty transient, doesn't stay in the body for too long, but it's the ongoing exposure we're getting on every single day that is affecting our body's pathways. Now we're getting our zinc, our copper, our magnesium displaces glycine, which is a very essential amino acid. We can't produce glutathione because we're getting those amino acids out in the right way. So it's affecting the performance to the core, to the most fundamental pieces of our needs, physiological needs, and that's one. So let me mention one more thing about this. We already talked about heavy metals. We were talking about now we're talking about pesticides and herbicides, and we have so many around these families. Every single one matters in terms of creating damage. And now you start thinking, okay, but I'm factoring and adding to the pool of toxicants all of this at the same time on a single person on a daily basis for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years of my life. No wonder why we're struggling trying to stay healthy in this polluted world.
It's almost an impossible feat. And I see the accumulation of the toxic burden, unfortunately, even present in our youth. So when you mention glyphosate and displacing glycine, if you look at collagen production, which is, you need that amino, which is key, we have a lot of our young athletes coming in with stress fractures or with connective tissue issues. Or their hormones are half of what they were when I was playing at their age. It is remarkable. And I see, again, a very, very steep increase in injury and risk potential with, again, this accumulated toxic burden. But nobody, as you go to your pediatrician, it's never being tested. Right. And if you look at the nutrition and the sad American diet, you're just being bombarded on a daily basis. And the problem is, while we evolved to deal with parasite and fungus and bacteria and virus, even heavy metals to an extent, we never evolved to deal with all those, plus this inundating toxic burden that we are now exposed to. Glyphosate, particularly, looking, I think it's estimated that 126% rise in Parkinson's, as an example. And I think that's set to outpace even Alzheimer's risk. And if you look at people, especially golfers who live near a golf course, heavily sprayed with glyphosate, I see golfers with so many unique issues related to glyphosate exposure, because we can test for that now. Is there a specific test you're doing to evaluate that?
Yeah, well, actually, it is a tricky one. Glyphosate is one of the molecules that you can speak with my scientific team here in the lab, and they will tell you it's a tricky one to detect it properly. I think that there's a room for optimizing actually the detection on the lab, from a lab perspective, and in human samples. So we're working very hard right now to get it right with the level of accuracy, because it's a switching molecule. It has a very weird behavioral pattern from a electromagnetic standpoint. It just switches from positive to negative. It's weird, but again, we're getting it right. And definitely, I'm very excited about what we will be offering in the future in terms of accuracy and the extension of the amount of toxins we will be detecting with our panel. And that's the goal, that we can offer something that becomes the gold standard for toxicological analysis. And this is all for one big reason. to understand what you're getting exposed to and establish a baseline that you can become proactive. Because everyone is hearing all these stories about PFAS and glyphosate and heavy metals, but you never know if that it's applying to you or not until you see it with your own eyes. And then that's when you have that aha moment and probably will switch your paradigms and make you conscious about what's going on. And that's what I'm hoping for, that this will switch the paradigms and make people aware that this is not something that's happening in a distant country. This is happening today in your house, within your environment, in everyone you know and yourself to a certain degree. It's not something you can avoid or skip. The only question is how much and which type of toxins I'm getting, so I can becoming proactive and dealing with this in a more efficient way, to improve my chances that I'm not going to get sick because of these things down the road. So yeah, that is my critical. There's the critical piece of information we need nowadays. Because as you said, you go to the pediatrician, you go to a regular doctor, they will never acknowledge this is an issue. They will never tell you, oh, let's look at the toxicological panel and see if there's something there that might be getting in the way from your immune system to behave properly, or your maybe your insulin resistance might be affected by this, or that's not even in their minds for a second. We need to do the homework, so we reverse that and we make it standard. Hopefully that's going to be the case. That's what I'm aiming for.
You know, what's interesting as a side note, I took my daughter to the pediatrician not long back. And anyways, so he said that he thought she was having some issues with her mucosal membrane, sinus, and allergies. She was just kind of sick with a cold. But hey, he said, I think she has allergies. And I go, okay, that's interesting. From what? Or why does she have allergies? Oh, well, you know, Daniel, it's just bad luck.
I am, of course. That's great to know that health is based on luck. Great. Don't we have the same chances of going to the roulette in the casino?
I'm not going to mention names, but yeah, I mean, he's the head physician at the department of a major practice. And so what's interesting, though, in terms of allergies, as a complete aside, we've begun to normalize what I term as the abnormal. Right? Allergies are abnormal. Asthma is abnormal. Skin issues are abnormal. Brain fog, fatigue, lethargy, sleep disruptions, hormonal imbalances, you name it. We begin to normalize a lot of these symptoms, because when you go to see a physician, often enough, it's just, here's the drug for the symptom. And I don't want to undermine, some of these physicians are bright individuals. It's just what tools you have in your toolkit. And so when people tell me they have seasonal allergies, they're already is something screaming out, we have barrier disruption, we have poor barrier integrity, we need to fix that. So when you said exposure to some of these chemicals, and like cadmium as an example, to decrease short chain fatty acid production, that's key to maintain gut barrier integrity. That's key for immune regulation, right? And so we see a lot of these heavy metals that are doing that. I know you mentioned like chelating minerals and electrolytes. Oxalobacter, one we can get into, because that's something we're testing for. And if you are not doing a stool test, to me, that is the number one longevity test you are missing out on. It is such interesting data. And while, I mean, the jury is out, perhaps how quickly things can change in your microbiome, for me is that we understand the bidirectional nature of our microbes and every sort of biological system in the body. But we have so many people saying oxalates are terrible for you. And beside the impact of oxalate, if you're missing the microbes that break down the oxalates, which I think food that contain oxalates can be in many regards beneficial, you're not able to bind some of these heavy metals, chelate out some of these heavy metals. So I think that it's called, there's a book called Missing Microbes. And what's happening is as we see a lot of these microbes missing, we have people that are touting like, you need to avoid this, this, and that. Well, actually, no, you don't. Just like your focus, my focus for the last decade has been on microbial medicine, because that to me is we're just beginning to scratch the surface. And while we have kind of decoded the bacteria biome, if you will. I think there is so much still to learn how the impact with postbiotics, as an example, another emerging field, or a lot of these other kind of genomics and the interplay of your microbiome. But let's go on to another group of wonderful. I used to call it the lucky seven, and now I call it the unlucky seven. So I know, like Peter, to your references is four horsemen. Mine are bacteria, fungus, virus, parasite, and then the additional of excessive, obviously, heavy metals and environmental toxins, and then you couple that with modern stress. But in terms of the next category of toxins, industrial chemicals, so PCBs, dioxins, that's certainly one which came on my radar some time ago. It's remarkable, that impact. PHAs from combustion and solvents. So obviously these persistent pollutants in the environment and how that is impacting our microbiome, if you want to dissect any of those.
Yeah, sure. Well, when it comes to the microbiome, again, affected by all these industrial pollutants, first and foremost, we're just learning because we have already 83,000 chemicals being produced in the United States. And that is a vast number. Of course, you will imagine there's no specific research for each one of them. So we're guessing, and in an individual form, what they can do that can be damaging our physiology and our microbiome. We have some data from a few of them. We're really missing the whole picture. And then imagine now these all bioaccumulated at the same time. We're interacting with our body and our cells and our microbes, and at the same time. The combinations are huge. And it's impossible probably to calculate the type of damage we're getting from them. But I will say that there's some common pathways we need to acknowledge. And the first one will be that there's a direct impact on the gut microbiome, as you mentioned. There's a change on the microbial diversity, both richness and evenness, so the balance is set off, and then your microbiome doesn't function in the way that it's supposed to. And the other problem is that it triggers imbalances on the microbiome composition that leads to a more pro-inflammatory microbiome and a microbiota. I interchange those names, and I will do it all my life probably, but we understand microbiome is genetics, microbiota, it's the actual microbes, and I keep doing this, using them as they were one thing, and they're not. But so that's one thing. And the other, then you have this ripple effect, where all these pollutants, VOCs and bisphenols and phthalates and all these other chemicals coming into the game, affecting your microbiome, your microbiota, what they do is they alter, again, the composition. Now you have, I will say, three major issues that are going to occur as a result of these type of imbalances driven by toxins. First, you will have a pro-inflammatory pattern where you're going to most likely get more lipopolysaccharides released in any given time of your day because of that pattern change. That will trigger immunological reactions in a greater way, which will lead to chronic immune activation. And then you set the ground for anything that can be diagnosed in the chronic illness realm. So it really depends now where is your weak point, and you will develop a certain type of disease. The root cause remains the same. The second part will be the expression of neurotransmitters, which is very aligned with this previous statement. That's why we see a raise on ADHD, autism, and every spectrum disorder, neurological, neurocognitive diseases, and even Parkinson, as you were mentioning, Alzheimer's. They have a profound connection with the alteration of the microbiome because of the alteration of the neurotransmitter production, and also creating byproducts that are actually the opposite. They're very negative for our physiology from a central nervous system perspective. And third is the alteration of the functionality of the support organs. when you create that pro-inflammatory state and you affect also the mitochondrial performance, because all these guys are getting in the way of the energy production of our cells. Now your cells in the liver, in the stomach, which are highly demanding for energy production, they can't get to the optimal functionality that they need to perform and keep things running in the way they're supposed to. So now we're not breaking foods properly. We're not maintaining a normal balance in the microbiome because we're not filtering or microorganisms because we don't have enough stomach acid to do that from the salivary entry standpoint. We are not producing enough bile. And now we are even driving more toxicity, more issues with nutrient absorption. So even to add a bigger issue to the already big issue of lack of nutrients in our diet, from the little amounts that we find in the South diet, now also we add the other factor that we're not able to squeeze even those minimum amounts of nutrients because we don't have the capabilities from the digestive organs perspective. And our immune system, which is also supported by the liver function, the biliary tree function, the kidney function, is not operating properly because the input is missed in a great extent. So I'm just connecting. I did a really quick summary of all the interconnections and then if you get crazy on this, I can start going back and forth with the brain and the gut and the adrenals and the cortisol and interleukin-6 elevations because of the sympathetic state activation, and then you go to more permeability, more toxins getting into the circulation, going back to the brain, and you can keep going. I mean, you can imagine, you can already picture how entangled, how interconnected everything is. But the key point, the starting point, always comes to the fact that there's a profound imbalance in our biology because we're affecting the terrain conditions by pollutants and toxicants that are not naturally supposed to be there. Well, we added those artificially because of progress and modern needs.
Let me underscore something that you had mentioned as well, because I think we see an explosion, if you will, of ADD, ADHD, Asperger's, autism, and heavy metals aside, this chemical class of organophosphates, insecticides, pesticides, obviously some of these other chemicals, it inhibits acetylcholinesterase. And what does that do? That breaks down acetylcholine in the nerves. What does that lead to? Well, you have hyperstimulation when you're not properly breaking that down because of these exposures. And so you're connecting the dots. I think that more people need to connect more dots. And then obviously how that degrades some of our microbes and just completely wipes them out. We see that when we do stool testing with our patients. But needless to say is beyond that, what's interesting as well is when I mentioned dioxins, as for example, is dioxins is per my understanding coming off the burning of waste products. And what happens is because we live in a global society, these waste products can travel a great distance and they're water soluble, but they don't degrade easily. So they remain in sediment, they accumulate in soil, and they're linked with some severe issues. I mean, mildly, you can say maybe liver toxicity, skin issues, but it's implicated in fetal development, learning ability with children, cancer, as an example. So we don't necessarily even understand the severity of what we're doing here. I know you said 3,000 chemicals. While that might be
80,000, 83,000 reported so far, and keep counting. We're 83,000.
I saw an interesting statistic in the other day that it's estimated that there is 2 billion pounds of chemicals in circulation at any given point here. 2 billion pounds. So I know you're alluding to kind of different chemicals, and no one is testing. It's impossible to test the chemical soup and plus because it's yearly, and so and it's allowed, unfortunately, here in the United States. It's almost like we do it and then ask for forgiveness, right? That's the philosophy here, I think, in the United States
Reverse
versus,
engineering, yeah.
yeah, in Europe, when you saw mice exposed to long-term use of glyphosate that developed cancer, right? The studies here were done up to, I think, 12 weeks, but there they saw tumor growth in months 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, right? So we understand it's the accumulation, the burden where we have kind of this, I don't want to say impaired ability to detox because the body does it very, very well innately. The problem is just the overload. Evolved with these kind of man-made synthetic, very dangerous, very aggressive substances that certainly impact our microbiome and microbiota very, very detrimentally. And we now recognize how that's impacting our overall health. And um, I do also want to provide hope for patients. So this isn't just a one-way street. I know you elegantly presented that also in your presentation. Before we get to solutions, let's maybe look at the last category, which is plastic, right? Which is kind of on the tip of everyone's tongue, and the presence of plastic accumulation, parabens, phthalates, BPA. Let's talk about how that also impacts the gut microbiome.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at plastics, there's two angles we can use. One is the actual plastics, like what we call microplastics, that are found everywhere, including in the fetus. Right now in the placenta, we have them in the brain, and we have them everywhere. Actually, they're pretty small particles for most of them. They vary in size, but they have these biological properties of interacting with our receptors. And that became really, really concerning when it comes to endocrine disruption, because they do block or alter the expression of hormones, especially estrogen hormones, based on the affinity they have for those same receptors in the body. And actually, that I think applies to many others, not only estrogen receptors. But also we have the additives for those plastics to have the mechanical, the physical properties we're looking for, like all these bottles that you can squeeze and smash or bend. Those physical properties are given by something called bisphenols. And then we have BPA, BPF, BPE, BPA. So we have plenty of them. Now, BPA being the most recognized because it was the one that was used the most initially. Now we're transitioning to different types of bisphenols, not A, but type E or type F. Now, are they better? We don't know. There's no enough data to say, oh, yes, we're replacing something bad with something not so bad or actually harmless. Actually, the little data we have right now is that they're even worse sometimes than the actual BPA. So we're really exchanging one demon for another. We're not really helping the cause of creating a better place for us to remove them out of our bodies. Now, they're transient. They go quick in and out, but they only need a very minimum amount to create the damage that they create in the body. So they affect the microbiome, they affect the biology in our cells, receptors, etc. They're linked to some forms of cancer and immunological disorders. So there's sufficient data to show that they're pretty damaging for our biology, and they don't need much in order to create that damage. And when you test for those, this is the interesting part, you will see them. But what it comes to my mind every time I see them is, okay, if this is something that doesn't stay in the body for longer than 12 hours in the worst scenario, and this person is telling me that is drinking from glass bottles and is not using plastic items on a regular basis, and is speaking high on BPA, well, that means that it's unavoidable. And that is the worst part of all this, that you can only avoid as much from being proactive. But 80% of the toxins we get today are ubiquitous and unavoidable on our daily routines. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be proactive on the things that we can do something about it. But nowadays, we have this major issue, and it's not going to get better only with avoidance itself. it's just not preventable to the full extent. That's my concern. But definitely plastics are concerning right now, because now even the healthy foods we want to eat, like good fish loaded with omega-3s and other beautiful nutrients, we're getting a little bit scared because now it's loaded with microplastics all around. And I do believe that this is where we draw the line, and probably it's going to be our next topic in our conversation, between avoidance and proactivity. What we can do to avoid them, or what we can do within our biology to optimize what we're getting exposed to that we can't avoid.
Plastic, in my humble opinion, it's absolutely, unfortunately, unavoidable. I always say I'm plastic free since 2003. But the reality is that if you even get takeout as an example, right, it's in plastic, like it's delivered in plastic, it's leaching. You get a Starbucks, the top of the cup, plastic. You're leaching plastic every single where. I mean, it's used to produce everything, and it's inexpensive, and in some degree it's benefited us, I think, but in largely not at the consequence of our health. And so I say often, we're not what we eat anymore. We are what we eat, drink, breathe, touch, and can't mitigate or eliminate. And that's the reality. So to me, I think avoidance is nearly impossible. It was interesting. I was on a plane across the seas, and I was watching this documentary where this group of Italian scientists, they were trying to devise a device that looked like a stingray or a manta ray that would float at the top of the ocean to collect plastics, completely undetectable to the naked eye. And what when they would lay this device down, they would kind of examine under a microscope, and it was just copious amounts of plastic at the level that is undetectable by eyesight. Right. So regardless, we're swimming in it is the reality.
Yeah. And you get them from the from the airway pathways, from skin contact, through the ingestion. So it's multifactorial in terms of how you're going to get it, how you get them on a daily basis. And they affect things like are critical, like your aryl hydrocarbon chain, for example, receptors, affecting your digestive capabilities, your immune system, your liver. It's just a mess in terms of the organs that are getting affected. Our microbiome, you will have a major switch on your FP ratio. You will have more resistant microbes, more inflammatory microbes created because of the exposure. They reduce the short chain fatty acid production, again, like you were mentioning before. For other things, they do the same, but this is another element. So if you start factoring the presence in our daily life of all these toxins all at once, just too much. I'm surprised that with this huge amount of toxins, we're not falling apart, like in an instant. Like we're not literally dropping in the floor and crashing, literally, because of how much we're dealing with on a daily basis. That tells us that our biology is superb, is amazingly resilient. But I think we got to the point that we need to be mindful about how to support our biology for getting away from the risk factors created by these toxins.
You mentioned, obviously, it's in the air we breathe, and looking at my philosophy is we don't live anymore congruent with our with our evolution or our biology. We go from one box to the next, whether it's our car, whether it's our houses, and there's plastic all around us. We breathe about 10,000 liters of oxygen daily, and that's probably the most overlooked component, I think, in modern medicine. Is a lot of what's happening is what we inhale, and that's what some of these industrial chemicals, as I expressed earlier on with Parkinson's, is just the door is at the nose, the olfactory bulb. And so, yes, that's impacting our microbiome. Yes, there's things that we can do about it. But you took the words brilliantly out of my mouth. Is we are resilient. We can survive and thrive. In fact, we just have to be very conscious with certain decisions. Let's take a look at clothes, for an example, because that was something you brought to my attention during your presentation. And I have only sourced organic clothing, interestingly, as I don't like the term woo-woo maybe, but as myopic as I am, even organic. It's interesting that we have to have a discourse around organic. That infers that obviously there is poison, and a poison to a less degree, because it's still poison. You're allowed to spray chemicals on organic cotton either way. So, but let's look at PFAs, or forever chemicals, perfluoride chemicals, how that's common in our cookware, but then also, I understand what you were saying, in clothes that are wrinkle-free. As an example, most people, we think that we're doing a convenience by buying these synthetic fibers that are wrinkle-free, so we don't have to iron. We pride ourselves on a convenience, but again, at the expense of our biology. So when you mentioned skin as well, our most kind of largest organ, most porous organ, if you're not considering muscle naturally, but how that's impacting, I guess, on a micro level with constant exposure on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Yeah. So PFAS was unfortunately, they were brought to the market by DuPont. I don't know if you know the story, and then 3M acquired them to be used in nonstick cookware and also some other items, including aerospace industry. They were very promising because of the physical properties they possessed, and how we were able to simplify our modern needs. Again, modern commodity, our comfort zone usually drives this type of things to a larger extent in our lives, and then it's hard to get away from them. So PFAS are a great example of how a modern world drives necessities to alter materials in a way that then we find out 10 years later that they were thoroughly damaging for our biology. We use them in everything, shampoos, like paints, like pesticides, packaging, clothing, you name it. Like it's really, and of course, cookware, which blows my mind. It still is so common to be found, even in any store you go to, any retail store that sells cookware, and you will find Teflon there across the whole aisle. And it's like, did we not establish already this thing is terrible for you, like it's incredibly harmful, and yet we still use this? Is allowed? Like, it boggles me how long it takes to create decisions when we already have enough data. Because I will understand, oh, nobody knew. Okay, well, I'm so sorry. We were selling this, but we were completely clueless. But how come we have tons of research done on how damaging these elements are, and we still don't move a finger? We're worried about red dyes, and honestly, those are avoidable. You can read the ingredients and not buy those things if you don't want to. But PFAS, unfortunately, are accumulating in the environment. So even if you don't want to expose to them, you're going to, because they're already there and they don't leave. That's why they're called forever chemicals. And we know that affects, one of the biggest parts that gets affected is the gut lining integrity. So they affect something called the efflux pump. And so everything that is supposed to be pushed back to the intestinal lumen is not going to, because they downregulate the expression of the efflux, the Toll-C efflux pump, and now you have permeability. And permeability triggers immune system imbalances all across the board. They also create imbalances on the microbiome side directly. But the worst part is also I will say the leaky gut side, and we know that leads to so many metabolic issues, and we know that exposure has good data behind that shows that you get insulin resistance and obesity driven by the presence of these PFASs of multiple kinds in our biology. Microbiome directly gets affected. So it's really, again, another element we add into the pool of toxicants we're exposed to on a daily basis that is affecting our biology massively. And unfortunately, not these specific type of guys, you have two types actually, the big molecules and the smaller molecules, both equally damaging. The small molecules are a little bit more damaging than the bigger ones, but the problem is that we don't know how they leave the body naturally. We can definitely improve the scavenging process and the binding process and try to get them out. But naturally speaking, for a person that is born today in this world, will have PFASs in his body or her body, and they're just not going to leave on their own. They're going to stay. And every single day matters. So by the age of 1, they already have 365 days of exposure to PFASs. That's my modeling. And we don't think about it. Unfortunately, I'm thinking about it. I'm not, that doesn't make me happy. But this is where, again, I draw the line. And if you call me, if we talk about the regulations for avoiding the exposure in the general population of all these toxins, I'm not happy either. We need to bring more awareness. And that's why testing, for example, making an affordable, easy test for these toxins makes total sense, because I believe that if we bring enough information, we empower society to drive the changes and improve the environment we're living at, and forcing regulations that allow this world to be cleaner and healthier.
It's disgusting is what it is in terms of what is allowable. And the point is not to get into politics. Obviously, there needs to be regulation and policy around this. So instead of restriction in helping people with certain, unfortunately, like insurance not covering certain testing and everything, that we can actually get to what's now deemed as root cause medicine. We need more, I think, regulation around this to understand that there is certainly hope, and we can test for a lot of these things. But it's important to discern what's going on, right? What about xenobiotics?
Well, all of these xenobiotics in general, it will include anything that's coming from the outside.
Yeah.
So again, they all have these common pathways in terms of affecting our environment. At the end of the day, whatever comes from the outside, beyond the norm and beyond the ranges, the standard ranges, affects our capabilities for putting together protocols aligned with preventive medicine. But that's why also it's important what I said before, the establishing baselines that are healthier in our environments provides a suitable place to also implement preventive medicine in our world, which is the most effective type of medicine, the medicine we do before things happen. So every single thing that we take out of the environment, any xenobiotic that could be present that is not there anymore or is reduced, matters to make things change. That is what I'm all about. But again, xenobiotics in general, across the board, are directly impacting the way we function, the way we're able to perform. And again, if we talk about longevity, for example, and that's a huge topic right now, so trending. Well, longevity should start with supporting detoxification. Because if what we're aiming to is optimizing our cellular performance, well, the best way to start is improving the environment, the settings of those cells, so they can do what they do better. All these chemicals, they upregulate or downregulate CYP enzymes. Now, most of the times, our body will cope when they get when it gets exposed to these xenobiotics by adjusting the CYP expression to a higher degree. But that creates more reactive oxygen species. If our physiological pathways on phase 2 and phase 3 are not optimized, then you get a huge buildup of reactive oxygen species that are not clear. And now you disrupt the system even. It is so important that when you look at detoxification, to be synergistic and comprehensive. Because if not, you are just accumulating one aspect of the phase of detoxification that is not going to be properly processed on the next step. And that creates more damage than good at the end of the day for the outcomes of the whole process in full. Our receptors are willing and able to receive all these inputs. It's just a matter of us being conscious about it and putting them on the table and making them work to the best of their performance. And we can definitely do that. I'm convinced.
It's a great segue for detox, but I want to ask just a couple more questions before we get there, which I know this has been very, very thorough. So I appreciate everything. How I love getting into the science and the weeds. So in terms of mycotoxins. And before you go there, what I want to reference, because you made a mention earlier, FB ratio. So for our population to understand it, Firmicutes to Bacteroides ratio, which comprises most of your phyla, we see now that there are signatures for every modern disease, for Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, specific cancer, autoimmune. Each disease has its own microbiome signature. And we can predict with a high degree now of efficacy of what happens later down the line. Autoimmune to me is a diagnosis of 7 years. And so things happen way early on. And so when you say prevent, that is the business of preventative medicine. And that's what we're really focused on here within our practice, is how do you stay ahead of the curve? Right? Can you do a total toxin testing to see your burden to make sure that you're staying on top of things? But even in your modern lifestyle, there's ways that you can do that. Mine is I always preach the foundation 5. You got to eat right, sleep right, move right, talk right, poop right, and you're going to feel right. And the reason why I asked about the xenobiotics is because while it encompasses kind of everything that we've discussed, my mentor always said, this was decades ago, assume everyone is xenotoxic until proven otherwise. And I see that with our total toxic burden. But let's go. What are your thoughts on mycotoxins?
So mycotoxins is another category that, again, it's naturally occurring. So this is not something foreign for us. And it became a problem for 2 reasons. One of them is a genetic disorder that affects more or less 25% of the population in the US, that doesn't allow the immune system to eliminate them properly. So instead, we activate something called the complement pathway. I'm not going to go in detail on that, but basically, the immune system scavenging process doesn't operate properly, and instead we activate an alternative pathway that doesn't allow the elimination of these toxins out of the system. It kind of neglects the activity of the primary function of the immune system, and it goes to this vicious circle mode where things are not cleared, and then they get reabsorbed and recirculated. So the problem with the mycotoxins is not that they are damaging per se in the right amounts, in the natural type of exposure we're meant to deal with on a daily basis. It's the genetic input we have in certain populations that are unable to eliminate them properly out of their bodies, plus, or along, some people will be separately, but it could also factor as a combined problem, the modern construction patterns and the way that we build things and we ventilate things inside our house, that it creates a bioaccumulation of these toxins internally without pushing them out in the same way. Because all the HVAC systems are bringing air from the outside into the inside the house, but that air doesn't leave the house at the same speed, in the same manner. So that air comes with those mycotoxins from the environment, which are diluted and they're not damaging at that level outside the house, but inside the house they get bioaccumulated, and now we increase the exposure by 10x, 50x, and that creates damage because of that increased potency on this type of toxins. Now, also construction materials are usually based on cellulose, and cellulose is the primary food for mold. And when they see these dark, humid areas inside your walls or other places in the house, they have a party. They have like the perfect setting to just thrive and grow more. They have all the abundance of foods there, and they start off-gassing these toxins inside the house because the insulation materials are actually on the outside. So inside they get all the possibilities to off gas these toxins, and now again they get bioaccumulated. This is of course a bigger problem in humid places. It's usually in the East Coast more than the central part of the United States, West Coast as well, maybe a little bit less in certain areas, but still, it is a transversal issue in many places. They are not typically tested for they're typically trationed, and they are usually eliminated as they are as a parent compound. So if you get ochratoxin A, for example, you eliminate ochratoxin A. They're water soluble. They will be eliminated typically by the urine, but that is only if you're getting the right amounts and you have the proper elimination pathways in place. Otherwise, they will create immunological and microcirculatory issues. The biotoxin testing panel that was proposed by Dr. Shoemaker, which I'm sure you know, it is big in analyzing inflammatory markers at the microcirculatory level, because that's how that's where they create the most amount of damage. That's why we check for MMP9 and PEGF1 and other blood markers, because we know that if you are getting affected by these type of toxins, that's where you need to look for to see if there's some type of damage. They also affect the endocrine system, which gets usually pretty off, and then all your melatonin control system gets off, and then you have hormonal, immune, and all the other issues related to melatonin production.
Yeah, which further suppresses the immune system. You're not sleeping. Your HPA balance is completely off, and your nervous system is dysregulated, and then you're not recovering, and then you're in this vicious loop where, unfortunately, you're no better. In
And
terms of,
and
go ahead.
no, sorry, when I say that, and unfortunately, these conditions, these clinical conditions that are driven by mycotoxicity, are both very common. I mentioned 25% of the population is sensitive to these toxins. They're pretty clear from a diagnostic standpoint in terms of the symptoms that are created, but they're not properly diagnosed because nobody's looking for mycotoxins, typically speaking. So you can have people that they look like crazy with all the symptoms that are randomly occurring because of the toxicity created by mycotoxins, but they're not properly diagnosed, and they're not treated or erroneously treated or suppressed, and that amplifies even more the damage at the end of the day.
Yeah, I have one that's something. So I have that same thing, the genetic susceptibility, and so that's something obviously very relevant, and going through a mold remediation in my home, and but in terms of food, obviously the exposure is growing. It's usually attributed to the storage of grains, of nuts, and it's no surprise now we're developing these sensitivities because these mycotoxins are extremely immune suppressants in some category. They really drive and upregulate certain cytokines, as you allude to, and inflammatory markers. Very, very, very damaging. And so the goal again is test and treat. I think that's how we do it. The last category here is going to be surfactants. So common household like dish soap, dish liquids, detergents, personal care products like toothpaste or shampoo. And then lastly, the emulsifiers. So in baked goods, or polysorbate 80, a super common one. What are kind of your thoughts on how this last one here is impacting?
I came to understand surfactants a little bit more just recently, out of a conversation with another scientist looking at microbiome imbalances, and um, the issues that there's a lot of research coming, especially from Australia right now, that is showing that they could be, don't quote me now because we need to prove this a little bit more, but they could be the single most damaging element for the microbiome, even more than glyphosate. because they're persistent. So you rinse something that you was already previously washed or cleaned with a surfactant, and it will remain in amounts that are sufficient to create damage. They literally wipe out the structure components of the microbes. They damage all the lipid structures around the cell membranes. They're used in plenty of household items like dishwashers and laundry detergents and so on and so forth. Soaps and shampoos and cosmetic products. We have them everywhere, but also foods. When you go, even just one example, dairy industry. When you make cheese, even organic, even grass-fed cheese, you have these huge tufts that you put the milk on and to create the coagulation process so you can make cheese out the other way. Well, the residual part of the milk needs to be washed. And the fats of the milk are pretty and stubborn and nasty to be washed out. So they use surfactants for cleaning all these items that are used in the dairy products production. Then you put another batch of milk, surfactant still is there. So it goes to your cheese, to your milk, to your butter, to anything. And that is just one example. I can name plenty of food industry processes that they use surfactants in their production just to clean. And they're not listed because they're not directly incorporated in your foods. They're just used as a cleaning agent. But they're coming inside your foods because they're persistent and they remain in those surfaces in small amounts, but sufficient to create damage. That's the problem with this. That's why I said at the conference we met that the main issue is that organic is not a certification of risk free in terms of toxins. That's unfortunately not the case. It's only a certification of non-intentional usage of certain chemicals. But they don't test how the soil was before or what you're getting from the underground water. You're not testing for what is used around the production of certain foods, etc., or the packaging even. You have organic products, organic foods made organically, but packaged in plastic containing and PFAS containing containers and packages. So yeah, how organic that is if you put it in a plastic or PFAS containing container or packaging.
Yeah, it's again to the point. It's just unavoidable, and it just that makes sense, right? I see when you're cleaning a lot of surfaces, right? When you're making certain cheeses and within dairy production or anything, I know, and you're repeatedly cleaning surfaces, theoretically doing good, but yet then it's coming up in our food and it's just washing out our microbiome as well, which is critical to detoxification. So let's segue into Detox U, or what's the solution here? What have you formulated? What's your solution? What's the solution in general? Testing that you like, probiotics, spore based or otherwise. What's kind of give us hope?
Well, I was looking for hope, and that's why I built what we built. Again, testing is not out there yet. Hopefully, soon. I'm looking for the first part of 2026. It's a long process to do things right, and longer if you want to improve. And we want to offer the best of the best. And with that in mind, of course, the research behind the scenes has been extensive. I'm speaking with the scientific team pretty frequently, and there's a lot of challenges, but it's promising in terms of what we can get done at the end of the day to optimize the visualization of what's going on in the world right now internally and then how it's affecting our body from all these different pollutants. Now, in the meantime, I spent more than a year formulating products. Now, what I did basically is that I was using different companies, different products, different systems, and grabbing what I liked the best from each company and putting protocols together. As a clinician, but also as a patient, I like to simplify everything I do to its best, because compliance is one of the biggest factors for success when it comes to any protocol. Now, if you put 10 bottles of things on the table and you ask a person to take 10 products 3-4 times a day and time them differently depending on the product, really it's not realistic for most of people's lives. And again, affects compliance tremendously. And also, it becomes very expensive. So all these things, they matter for me to put together what we did with DetoxU. What I did is I went back to the research. I did an extensive research about what was working on each receptors that are participant in all the processing of toxins across the board. I looked for with the ones that they had the most amount of evidence. I create a redundancy system also to support the process in multiple ways at the same time. Adjust potency to be optimized for our physiological needs without overwhelming receptors, which is a major issue when it comes to supplements and products that I see in the market. They think more is better. That's an absolute fallacy. You need the optimal dosage for physiological performance. And beyond that point, you're actually reversing the optimization process. And I put this together in a way that you need only 2 products to make it work. And so compliance becomes optimized, and also the simplicity and the price point. Because you're not paying for each bottle, each batch of production of a single product. You're putting a lot of different ingredients in just one single blend. And so you're cutting the cost to the consumer. It's more expensive for us to produce, unfortunately, but it's better for the consumer perspective, because it's less products, less handling, less shipping, less everything. So all these things matter when it came to put together this formula. What we created was it is a 2-product system that can be optimized or enhanced by 3 focus products that I will mention in a minute, that they work synergistically to improve the mobilization of toxins when they arrive into your detoxification organs, liver and kidneys, and they allow those toxins to be moved and processed and adjusted so they can be eliminated without interferences. And on the side, we decided, okay, we need to protect the cells while we were doing this process. So we created something that is called the cellular detox matrix, which is a proprietary blend of antioxidants that are very effective in promoting mitochondrial health and protecting the cells from getting damaged while we're pushing this process across the board. And then we added the binder, of course, to capture these toxins. And we made a binder that is probably the most comprehensive binder in the market. I'm not biased to say that, but the idea here is to not only support the binding process, but also assisting with the cofactors and the nutrients that are needed for that process to occur without damaging the gut lining, without depleting the reservoirs of certain minerals, and sealing the tight junction that you were mentioning, so we avoid permeability issues while we're doing this. And so we create a high effective binding process that doesn't allow these toxins to come back to the circulation, getting reabsorbed and creating these chronic immune activations that we spoke before in this conversation. That is the main philosophy behind our products, that we're simplifying people's lives. We're still providing a very comprehensive and very efficient protocol that people can be compliant, and the protocol works around people's schedules and life, and not the opposite. I don't want people to change their lives and schedules to work around the protocol. I don't think that is actually allows the compliance and the effectivity of the protocol itself. Actually goes against. Now we have focus products The focus products are mainly intended to support a specific group of toxin detoxification. So our body, again, detoxifies naturally, but we know things are a little bit more damaging on this side or that side, depending on the nature of the toxins. So we put together 3 formulas that they support the main detoxification process if you know already the group of toxins you're getting affected by. As an example, simple example, let's say you didn't get tested with any testing for toxins, but you're traveling a lot. You know you're getting a lot of airborne pollutants. You know you're getting all these VOCs. You know you're breathing them out and in and out all the time. Well, there's a focus product called Industrial, which is mainly supporting your airway pathways. Besides, of course, supporting antioxidant support, etc. But one of the main signature elements of that product is that it helps elimination of toxins from the respiratory tract, and so if you know that, you can use that as an additional to the core product. At the end of the day, all toxins, they go through this common pathway. So there's no differentiation in terms of how we handle different toxins because they all arrive into the liver, they all arrive into the kidneys, they all are processed through the same phases of detoxification, and they go through the same organs for elimination. The important part is how we support those organs to optimize their performance and how we protect the structures that we know are getting mostly damaged from certain toxins if we already know the type of toxins we're getting exposed to. And that is what we were able to achieve with Detoxy.
In terms of the binder, your
Mhm.
unbiased best binder. So
Very
what is the
unbiased.
formulation?
So we added the most common mineral binders. You know, all these binders, all these molecules, they have they're charged and negatively or positively. So they have positive charges or negative charges. They have affinity with different types of toxins. Some toxins are more electronegatively charged. Some toxins are electropositively charged. So when you were talking about, for example, COVID, viruses, where they have a certain type of charge, but the proteins of the viruses, they have a different type of charge, and so on and so forth. Mycotoxins, for example, they have different types of affinity, and so we blend everything that is known to be effective to bind different types of toxins across the board with a high level of efficiency. So activated charcoal, bentonite clay, chitosan, zeolite, silica, there were musts because those are very known, very effective, and well, like long-term used mineral binders for reducing toxicity burdens. There was another challenge that is pretty common. A lot of people probably you have seen a lot of them. They're very sensitive to sulfur. So when it comes to glutathione production or sulforaphane or even food containing sulfur, they are pretty sensitive. Most of the times it's because they're missing a cofactor, and that cofactor is molybdenum. So with that in mind, and because we know that the vast majority of the population is low in molybdenum for various reasons, actually out of the nutrient the nutrient load in our foods, unfortunately, it's very rare to be found. We added molybdenum in physiological potencies, dosages for supporting those pathways and that activation of those pathways on the sulfur cysteine biochemical pathways. And then the other element we added is shilajit. Now, shilajit it's a scavenging element on its own. It helps with arsenic, cadmium, lead reduction. There's a lot of good research about that, but also helps tightening the tight junctions, seals the gut junctions. So though these fulvic and humic acids, they act within the microbial space as a very important input to seal those tight junctions and prevent reabsorption and anything else coming from the leaky gut perspective. Plus the fact that you have naturally occurring minerals there that can be used for other purposes and as cofactors as well. So you have a very, very nice and very comprehensive blend of different minerals and ingredients that will support the binding process very efficiently. So you don't lose anything, regardless of the type of toxin you're dealing with in a major amount.
Very comprehensive, very thorough. I certainly appreciate that. In terms of the treatment plan or protocol, is that what you have laid out on the website, or is it very specific to symptoms? Because I know you mentioned industrial, so for certain circumstances, or you have just like a very cut and dry. Okay, here's step one, right? You're doing these two for the first phase, and then move on.
So because the protocol itself, it's quite simple in terms of the amount of products we have and how comprehensive they are on their own. So the remover, which is the phase 1, phase 2 optimizer plus cellular, also protective, and it's a mild diuretic, so it helps with flushing toxin from the kidney perspective. We added something called goldenrod there, which is beautiful for flushing and supporting nephrons and elimination of toxins from the renal activity without losing minerals, which is the beauty of it. Just a diuretic without the mineral loss. So things like that, dandelion as well. Because we all use the common pathways for toxin elimination, you don't need to really get deeper into the understanding on the specific parts of the protocol in order to support your detoxification pathways. Now, again, the focus products are meant to be used by either the guidance of a practitioner, or if you were tested already, that's something that will support your findings to make your protocol more comprehensive. But at the end of the day, it always comes down to your liver functionality, your kidney functionality, and the proper binding of toxins through the intestinal tract, so we avoid reabsorption. And if we take care of those elements, and of course, protecting ourselves throughout the process, we're taking care of the vast majority of the elements that are needed to optimize detoxification. It doesn't need to be that complex. The problem is that, and unfortunately, this was something I encountered multiple times, the industry let us think, like from many years, that protocols for detoxification, they should be complex, expensive, and hard to be used. And it's not meant to be like that. Actually, if you go to the root medicine of all these type of protocols, when it comes to Chinese medicine, when it comes to Ayurvedic medicine, you will go to a Chinese doctor in the most traditional sense, will grab a few herbs, they will mash them, morton pistil, they will put them in a nice tablet, and they will give it to you. You will take it a few times a day. Those were just herbs that were supporting internally all these receptors. Now we have fancy names for that. Now we understand the biochemistry behind them. These guys, they didn't, but they understood the core philosophy of how our body functions. And that is enough. And it wasn't complex or expensive, and still they got a lot of things done and fixed and healed. Now we're just using the same rationality, the same wisdom. We just apply a little bit more modern concepts to deliver this in an easier way to everyone. But the fundamental pieces are still there, embedded. If you see the formulas, you'll see all our botanicals. They're all herbs. And we have that natural wisdom internally with all these receptors receiving this input and optimizing what they do naturally. So we have a connection between nature from the outside and internally. And we just need to provide that input. And again, these things were coming in our foods, in our environment. We were doing this on a daily basis. They were rooted in cultural practices. We just lost it over years because we got too fancy, too wise, too technological, and now we dismiss that these things are actually great ways of improving our biology and our physiology and our health, and allows us to thrive. So I'm bringing this back into the equation in a simplistic manner. And again, doesn't need to be that complicated, and it doesn't need to be harsh. If you work with the physiological potencies and you don't overwhelm your receptors, you don't create a strong flush, you just keep things moving consistently and optimally, you don't get side effects. You don't get heart reactions. Why should it? This is working in your body every single day. We just need to optimize it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that is the most profound example or epitome of natural medicine. And I can speak to that when I went to visit my cousin in Sicily, and we were walking just along the roads in the mountain village. He would point out different flora and different herbs, one for digestion, one for if you have a rash, one for a mosquito bite, one if you have a cold. And he's just pointing them to out and suggesting me to smell, taste, try, touch. And I just asked him, how do you know what all this is? And he looks at me and he says, "How do you not?"
How disconnected are you? Like, and it's true. I'm guilty of charge for many years to see healing solutions around me, around my environment, and being completely clueless how potent, how effective they were, and how cheap. Literally go out there and find them. You have already a beautiful infusion, a beautiful tincture you can do at home. I used to make my own bitters at home. I didn't want to pay so much money for just a tincture. I grabbed those herbs and said, let them sit in a good quality vodka for 2 months or a month and a half. And I have my own tincture for the rest of the year. And guess what? Amazing. Like, best tincture ever. It was made by me in my home.
Yeah.
Had my input. I
It's
believe that.
remarkable what's overlooked.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember my grandmother, and they knew about these herbs. And they will go to the apothecary, or they will go to the herbology store, and they will grab them and they will use them in multiple purposes. Me, clueless. No, give me an aspirin or whatever. I have no clue. I have to retrace those steps to relearn that beautiful wisdom that we're losing.
It's innate in our biology, right? We have plant receptors. We evolved with plants. I mean, plants are healing, and instead now we go to pharmacology, right? So we are certainly disconnected, and that's why my philosophy is we're just no longer living in congruent with our biology or our evolution. And unfortunately, although we are living longer lives, it doesn't mean we're living healthier lives. And unfortunately, but we're still, is that the youngest among us are now becoming afflicted, and so that's where I worry for our children. It's interesting when you said going into your backyard, or I have my child go scavenge dandelion because I'm a huge proponent of dandelion and increasing bitters for bioabsorption to bind to toxins for natural elimination, and we have it growing in our fields naturally, right? So there's so much that we can source that we don't realize, but we see them as weeds, as an example, right? The difference between a flower and a weed is just our orientation, how we describe it. But yet there's so much power within that, our herbs. And so I appreciate what you put together and shared. It's interesting too, because when I had asked you in person, DMPS, DMSO, chelation therapy, very, very relevant, obviously, with mercury toxicity, any of these heavy metals, which we know accumulated, which we elegantly discussed at the beginning of the episode. You said, no, these are all calcium EDTA. These are all very aggressive sources. And you said, here's a better mousetrap. Here's a better solution, more gentle, that coincides with how your body intended.
Exactly. I mean, the strong chelators, for me, it's not a hard no. There's maybe a place and time for using them, but for any therapy that's going to be used with this model, which it's my favorite, which is consistency over time, rather than trying to run a sprint and flush things out in a few weeks or maybe a month, which I believe is very risky for your biology, your microbiome, your everything involved in the process. Never was the natural form for detoxifying anyway. So what happens is that they will strip out so many other good things. And people can argue, well, but the mineral binders, they do that. Yes, but we're more adjusted because the potency, it's adjusted to for our biology to cope with. But when you use EDTA or DMSA, they're so strong. They have so many strong binding capabilities that there's going to be collateral damage every single time. And the problem is how we recover from that, and how long it will take. So the microbiome downsides of using EDTA, and the other biological elements, cell perspective, gut lining perspective, etc., are concerning. So again, in the proper setting, in the proper situation, maybe, but on just a regular recommendation, there's many protocols I've seen from a lot of people recommending this type of products in their detoxification protocols. I've tested hundreds of people using gentle approaches, and the reduction patterns are fantastic. 30-40% reduction within 3 months to 6 months, depending on the nature of the toxins we're looking at. So I don't see the reason why we should use something stronger when we see that the most benign forms of binders are working equally as good as the others, or if not better, because of the less risk factors we're adding into the mix.
Well, I'm certainly eager to try your formulations, both myself and our patient population here. So I know we'll include all that in the show notes for our community here. How does the oral microbiome, what is the connection with the oral microbiome and how that's implicated in all of this? Obviously, going back to your background.
So when it comes to the oral microbiome, oral microbiome, it's a seeding piece for the gut microbiome, and it's also an informational piece for the gut microbiome. We receive so much input in this area of our bodies, and coming from the outside, the mouth microbiome has a modulatory effect on those pieces of information beyond everything else we know that it's associated with. The informational part is a huge piece of what the microbiome of the mouth does. And so we bring these microbes into the gut. And then, of course, there's a filtering system. That's why we have to be careful about certain things that are bypassing the filtering system naturally, like talking about things that are aggressively forcing an entry of a certain probiotic, for example, or a certain nutrient, etc. We need to be mindful that those barriers exist for a reason. Now, with the proper filtering, with the proper modulation and the proper balance, this is a great piece for supporting the immune system functionality. So the immune system is tightly connected to the oral microbiome status and what information we're bringing in from the external side to the internal side. Being most of the digestive tract is still external, but there's compartments. Now, the other piece is that the microbiome of the mouth gets majorly fed by foods that we reabsorbed in the intestinal lumen. So the microbiome of the gut actually is responsible in a major way to feed properly the mouth microbiome. So we reabsorb nutrients from the gut and we bring them back to the salivary glands, and now we distribute them evenly in the mouth microbiome. That's actually why I was so shocked when I saw that the microbiome patterns were so stable over time within the analysis done on different niches. And the reason why, because I thought, well, this should be all over the place, because we open the mouth, we eat different things, we chew from one side or the other. So the distribution of the foods, it's a mess. How we can keep stability in the compositional patterns of the mouth microbiome. The reason is because we're not feeding the microbiome of the mouth when we chew foods, but when we reabsorb those nutrients from the gut into the mouth. And that's actually how we explain the nitric oxide production beyond L-arginine pathways. On the endothelial side, we produce nitric oxide when we reduce our nitric oxide synthase to lower levels. Then we sustain the nitric oxide production because we're bringing these nitrates back to the mouth after they were reabsorbed in the gut. And then they are processed by certain bacteria in the mouth, and then we reduce them from nitrates into nitrites. Then we swallow them again, and in the stomach, they become nitric oxide. If the mouth microbiome is in balance, and that is a very important part of the equation. And that brings me back to what happens if we don't have a proper mouth microbiome balance. Then we start sending inputs that are wrong. They're inflammatory, and they will create reactions. And that triggers immune responses that leads to chronic illnesses. Also, we're seeding the microbiome of the gut with abnormal patterns of microbes. And we know that that can lead to very serious illnesses if some guys arrive there, like Fusobacterium nucleatum, for example, which is highly associated with colorectal cancer and other forms of cancer, or Porphyromonas gingivalis, etc. So now we start closing the circle where the gut microbiome supports the healthy status of the mouth microbiome, and the healthy microbiome of the mouth supports the normal balance in the immune side and also the gut microbiome status. So we are synergistically collaborating. Now, let's add toxins into the equation. Toxins are going to affect the digestive process. So definitely they will affect the reabsorption of nutrients to feed properly and evenly the mouth microbiome. So now you get mouth microbiome imbalances and diseases associated with those imbalances because of the toxicity factor. And if you do non-biological dentistry procedures in your mouth, now you're using metals and chemicals and plastics and like all these resins and things like that. They're loaded with plastics, and now you're swallowing them or getting exposed to them in various forms with different pathways, affecting your own biology and adding more toxins into your biological toxic burden. So it's all connected. Would people love to separate things? Me included before. The more I learn about different things, the more I understand that we're just one single entity, interconnected and all comprehensive in our systems without like fundamental separation. It's just an illusion we created that if we can put divisions here, and we think because of the anatomical structures we're separated internally, the reality is that we're not. So everything gets affected in full if something goes wrong. If we're getting exposed to toxins, everything in your body will suffer. It's not just the gut, it's not the microbiome, it's not your liver, it's not your kidneys. It could be everything.
I don't know how much time you have left, but there's a couple of things that what you were saying that jogs my mind. Certainly the modern, my big gripe within modern medicine is that we segment, and that's kind of the antithesis of holistic health, right? We are not just one organ or one specialty. And while I don't want to undermine specialties, everything is connected. So you push on one, it affects elsewhere in the body, especially our fascia connects head to toe. So even on the exterior, that's implicated. In terms of like your oral microbiome testing, are you doing oral DNA tests, a periodontal test, any sort of testing you're doing there or no?
Not really. I mean, there's a certain value in testing. There's not too many companies that are doing a comprehensive testing, but what I'm really not happy about, all the companies I know, and probably there might be some that I don't know that they might be doing a really good job, is the push of antimicrobials after seeing certain microbes present in their samples. Also, the usage of saliva as the main sampling agent. Saliva, it is representative, but it's not the whole picture. So we have to be mindful that we're seeing a fraction of what the mouth microbiome represents on all the different niches internally in the mouth. And the other thing is, again, the push of antimicrobials that they will see P. gingivalis or other red fruit bacteria in the periodontal categories, and they will say, oh, no, you have to use this antimicrobial or this agent or this. And again, we have this linear, narrow-sighted view that microbes are growing more out of nowhere. In a petri dish, you want to grow one microbe, one colony of microbes. You need to provide pH, oxygen, nutrients, temperature, etc. And if you don't provide the right settings, they don't grow, or you might grow something else. In the body, it doesn't happen in a very different way. If you provide the right settings, you will grow the right things. If you provide the wrong settings, you will grow the wrong things. So if you see P. gingivalis, Agrobacter, Actinomyces incomitans, if you see Fusobacterium nucleatum, all these very aggressive, potentially pathogenic bacteria, think about how you're supporting your terrain, not just go after them and kill them. Because guess what? You're going to get the same problem over and over. You're not fixing the environmental settings. If you change the environment, you change the growth patterns. And then you never have that problem again. Same with SIBO, same with SIFO, and any type of dysbiotic issue, related issue. So that's my fundamental issue with those testings. They scare people and they send them to therapies that I don't really endorse. From the analytic part, if you have a good full metagenomic sequencing analysis for the mouth microbiome, I see a value, especially if you connect the dots with the gut microbiome testing. And you can see both sides, and you can connect dots even deeper in what's going on in your microbial balance.
Wisdom teeth removal. I mean, I saw some recent research where in the soft tissue, there's mesenchymal stem cells that you can harness autologous. Are you conscious about the removal of wisdom teeth? How does that play into your practice?
The body doesn't grow anything that doesn't need. Doesn't spend a single minute of effort growing something that we want to use. The problem is that we have a certain modern factors that are affecting the growth rates and the growth patterns of our mouth structures. First and foremost, we're not chewing. We've hardly put some stress on our jaw bones and our ligaments and our joints. We're mainly passing foods without putting the vertical input on the physical pathways of physiological pathways of our mastication process. So the vertical growth patterns are neglected, and we start getting this residual horizontal growth pattern. And yes, of course, we get cramping and the anterior part, and then orthodontists are doing a party because they have more clients, and then the wisdom tooth are looked at the evil guy because, well, they're there pushing those teeth. That's fallacy. They don't have the strength to push that. And actually, if we were more mindful about chewing our foods, probably we'll regain that vertical growth pattern in our jaw bones, allowing the space for those teeth to come out normally. But we're not. We're actually shrinking our mouth structures every single decade, every generation that passes. And that's one factor. Now, if you're going to remove them because of any justifiable situation, it needs to be done with biological procedures. Because I can't tell you how many times I've seen cavitations underneath. And they say, no, cavitations is an illusion, doesn't happen. But I've seen open jaw bones with necrotic tissue inside, rotting, smelling from an area that was the extraction site 10 years ago of a wisdom tooth. So don't go and tell me that doesn't exist, because I smell it and saw it directly. So that, if the procedure is done with that in mind, what happens is that there's necrotic ligament that stays there, the rottens, creates a chronic infection site, doesn't allow blood flow to come in and repair, and then you have a chronic infected site that triggers immunological reactions across the board. So if you're going to remove your wisdom tooth for any reason, you need to do the biological procedure with ozone, laser, the proper surgical instruments, and removing that ligament, leave that blood flow to come back and repair naturally that structure that was damaged because of that surgical procedure.
Are you doing a 3D cone beam scan to look for cavitations?
It should be. Yeah, that's if you don't see it, you don't know. So that's what the same rule applies with testing. If you don't test, you're just guessing. And in the imaging world, I'm not a huge fan of radiation, but it's the lesser evil compared to missing something that can be so major in terms of health concerns.
So when I had my wisdom teeth removal, and to me this was medical malpractice at the time, but needless to say, my understanding is that, as you said, that the body doesn't make mistakes, and each tooth correlates with an organ function. So my conception is your wisdom teeth connects with your small intestine and your heart. Interestingly, after the removal, I developed an arrhythmia and I developed very sensitive GI issues that were not fixed for decades to come until I had developed my own understanding of how this needs to be corrected. And then kind of you work your way up the other teeth, I think the second generation pancreas and spleen, gut. But needless to say is that each tooth correlates with a specific function. When people come to see you and they complain of a specific tooth, are you then tying that into a different organ that's correlated and trying to then connect at that organ level?
For academic purposes only, because I don't see patients anymore and not
Yeah.
practicing. So, but I can speak from on behalf of my biological dentist colleagues that are working and sweating to get people better every single day. I'm in the comfort zone right now because I step out of that, but for the sake of having time of to do everything I'm doing on the side. It's a really bad excuse, but it is what it is. Now, to your point, the connection of each organ to each tooth structure is known from centuries ago, like thousands of years ago. And that doesn't apply only to the meridians of the tooth, of each tooth. It also applies to everything else in the body. As we mentioned before, everything is interconnected through this huge system that we call the ECM. And our biological feedbacks are there. So we tend to believe that if something happens in the mouth, our intestines, they don't know nothing about it, or something happens in your ears, and our knee joints are not aware of that. And actually, everything is being read and processed in an integral form. Um, Whatever we know about it, or we get symptoms because of that, that's a different situation. But things are happening at an intracellular level from these communication pathways that they were called meridians by Chinese medicine. Um, so when you extract the tooth, yes, there's a potential connection between other organs, and I've seen even reversal in certain symptoms when things are treated accordingly and biologically. So I've seen both sides of the equations. I've seen symptoms arising from certain procedures not done biologically, and I've seen resolution of symptoms by doing things or correcting things with the biological input in mind. Um, and that's why it's so important, again, to respect the biological principles of our body. Not because it's cooler or it's just the trend, or no, this is not. This is just coming to the fundamental needs of our body to repair and heal. And any interference can affect that process. And again, the body knows what to do and how to do it. But man-made or the touch the touch of humans in the process, the interference of our technology and our ways that are supposed to be more modern, sometimes are affecting the natural pathways of our body to do things in the proper way. And I'm all about going back, reversing that philosophy to the natural roots of medicine.
I've always been taught and learned if man made it, stay away. If nature made it, it's okay.
Sure. Yeah, that's nature is the only medicine, and we usually are very, very intentional in getting in the way of what nature knows how to fix. It's uh, and we, again, if you go to, and I will finish saying this, if well, I have only a few minutes more, unfortunately, but if you go to the biocybernetic concept, where you have an input and there's an output. If you have a fever, for example, you're blocking the input. That's why you correct the output when you use a medication to block the fever. But the input was created for a reason. And if we respect those biological principles, everything that we optimize, everything we stimulate naturally provides a very better input and a better processing in our biocybernetic systems. So the output becomes better. And again, coming back to, like, for example, detoxification support products, we're not switching the input for a different one. we're supporting the input and the modulation of the processing, so the output becomes more efficient. That's it. It's nature optimizing nature, and nothing else. Um, Everything else that is artificial, synthetic, man-made, what it does is the opposite, blocks the circuit. So now, without the feedback, without the input, the body resolves the symptoms, but it doesn't resolve the root cause.
Yeah, the environment remains the same. Two last questions. One is maybe you just addressed it, is any parting advice for our listeners given today's discussion?
Trust your bodies. Do and don't do. Be proactive, be aware, be conscious. Do things that are beneficial for you when needed, and then enjoy your life and stop. Because you if you are taking a product every single day all the time, you're going to tell your body you're not well, and you're not in the right place to thrive and enjoy your life. So become proactive. Amazing. You should, because there's a lot of challenges right now in the modern world. But when you finish with a smile in your face and let your body rest and enjoy your life, because you are healthy enough. If you feel healthy enough, you should enjoy that time too. And by design, we're meant to be healthy, not sick. So just shut down for a minute from all the input on the information and enjoy life, because this is a beautiful world, regardless of the toxins and everything we're getting on the side. It's a beautiful world. We should be enjoying it.
Yeah, it's estimated that adults, I think, smile and laugh 14 times a day, while children upwards of 140 times a day. We forget that we're really just big adults, big kids rather, and so incorporating more play and enjoyment is certainly critical in our modern stressful era. Last question is, if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Superpower. I would love time traveling. I was born in the 80s, and I think part of me is still stuck on the 80s. I always joke about this, but it's actually true. I don't watch modern films. I still watch the same movies I was watching when I was 12, 10 years old. Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, and things like that. I didn't move forward from that phase of the world, but also because I have memories about me enjoying with my friends outside, disconnected from all this technology, and just enjoying being us. And that social component, I think, is going away because of the modern advancements. And I think that was a beautiful time in the world where we were pretty connected, and it felt like everything was okay, no matter what. I like that peace of mind that was given. I still have it, but yeah, I have good memories of that time in the world.
This has been a genuine pleasure. We're going to link to everything in the show notes. Where can people learn more, find you, buy the products?
detoxu.com. That's our website. I'm also reachable through social media. Dr. Haroldo, my name, Dr. Haroldo in Instagram. That's my account. Detox.u also is the account on Instagram for our company. Shoot some questions if you have them. Happy to help. I'm present as much as I can in terms of connecting with people that are interested in getting things done in a natural and optimal way. And I will send you something for later as a gift for all your audience that they can use on our website. That's part of the the part of this conversation.
We appreciate that. Thank you again. Certainly, this has been eye-opening conversation. I appreciate the depth of your experience and expertise, and the knowledge you provided us in terms of exposure and also the solution. There definitely is a way out, and so we just need to be mindful, ideally proactive, but certainly there's ways to get unstuck as well. So definitely we'll add everything in the show notes for everyone who's interested. This should be a staple in everyone's protocol, given our deluge of toxicity in our modern era. I know we're doing testing. We're seeing that every single day within our patients. And so it's quite essential at this point. But nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed everything. Thank you. Until next time, stay healthy and stay proactive, my friends. Thank you
so
Haroldo.
much. Oh, pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to the TBD Fit podcast on Dr. Talks, where we unpack all things health and longevity. If you enjoy the show, like, review, and subscribe. This allows us to have a greater reach and help others on their health and wellness journey.